delighted to host, I think it's our third lesson observation for real. We're trying something a little bit different. We're going for a live observed lesson which is being filmed now. Now the lesson has actually started, as you might have seen. Chris Greer is our history teacher. It is live, it hasn't been pre-recorded, and Roger, thank you for being our host, who's going to facilitate the discussion later. Hopefully you'll know that when Roger goes into the room, you'll still be able to see he's still wearing the same garb as you can see now. So there's no tricks here. So you're going to see, and you've got the details of, a Year 13 history lesson delivered by Chris Greer. Now he started at 4 o'clock. So when Roger does enter the room, you'll have a sense from the lesson plan, which is in purple, approximately where Chris is in terms of that lesson. It's a large Year 13 group. There's actually 19 in the group. There are 17, should be 17 present, one who couldn't make it. You can see you'll see if you've got, there's a data sheet there from their past performance. It's a very mixed ability group. Do please, I know I'm aware that traffic's not as you'd expect from a small town like Warwick. So Chris has taken this opportunity to do the full hour. He wants to squeeze in an additional lesson in preparation for their coursework at Year 13. And he's looking to really develop wider reading skills and getting them to synthesise and evaluate information during this lesson. The unit directly explores change over time. And you'll see from there's a question up there and in the lesson plan, it links to the Crusades. Now this is an aspect that they find particularly difficult, kind of analysing change over time. It involves no new content, but it's looking at what they'll apply what they already know to new reading. We've chosen to film it, obviously, because it's a full hour. Chris wants to deliver a full hour lesson. But we also wanted to just demonstrate how we're using film a little bit and raise some discussion about the use of film for observation and coaching purposes. We're not on commission. We happen to have purchased Iris. We looked at several kits a couple of years ago when we decided that actually getting a video cam set up and the editing set up was just becoming too unwieldy. So we wanted something that was a bit more personalised, and we liked the philosophy behind Iris, the fact that it's password protected, and staff have complete ownership. Anna, I'm going to say a few things about Iris.
Hi. My role at school is the Director of Staff Development, so I'm just going to talk you a little bit through how we've used Iris and our journey with the equipment so far. I'm just going to put, although we aren't on commission, it looks like we are when I put this up. There we go. I just wanted to show you this because I'm going to be talking about some of the different parts of the equipment so that you can see what it is I'm talking about. So we're in our second year of having the equipment. To begin with, last year, the teaching and learning team spent quite a lot of time getting to know Fran. Fran is our live camera. They all come with names. So this is the one that we're using tonight in Chris's room as well. So it's this one which enables us to see it as in real time as it's happening. The disco kit is this one that you can see here, the Discovery kit. And initially we probably did use that one more. I'll speak a little bit about why that is in a moment. I'm not going to lie, we did have some teething problems with it to begin with. Ports and network connections not working in classrooms, things like that. But we've got great IT joining us being able to get this up and running, and they've created some photographic how-to sheets so that we can make it really accessible to staff, because we quickly realised the potential that we could have with this equipment. So the system we currently operate under is that individual teachers can access the cameras for their own development, and they are given licences to allow them to kind of log on, and it be a closed system that other people can't see this unless they choose to share the films that they create with other members of staff. Students and NQTs are all encouraged to use the system as well. So as I was saying, we probably use this one most to begin with because it gives that opportunity to use two cameras. One of them, the one that's on this kind of swivelly thing, it actually tracks the teacher as they're moving around the classroom through the microphone and the lanyard that they wear. And teachers can either review the films themselves, or a more powerful way that we found was to actually watch it alongside an observer and discuss the lesson as it happens. As a developmental tool, we found this to be fantastic as it was really reflective and it allowed people to ask questions. And ultimately, the power of filming yourself is that you can see and hear what you're doing yourself. which allows you to kind of react to it more instantly, I feel. The live camera we have used a fair bit because it's much less obvious when it's in the classroom, because you can just put it in the corner, and then, as I'll show you in a moment, you can the observer can then control it. So you can zoom in on things, and you can roam, and you can have a look at what's happening. The kids in the classroom don't actually see any part of it moving, so it doesn't distract in any way. It's great because the observer can watch in real time but not impact the behaviour in the classroom, as can sometimes happen when you're physically in the room. So I used it with a group of Year 9s, and one of our lead practitioners, Amy, watched. So that the great thing about it is that you can comment on it as well as you're watching it, which is what I'll show you now, and which is part of the power of it. So this is Chris actually teaching now, and when you're watching it as an observer, you can comment in here and add it in, and the great thing is that it then puts a play button, so that when the teacher watches it back, they can see what you put, maybe, I don't know, great questioning or something like that, and they can then play that section. So you've got really specific parts of the film that you can zoom in on, and you can kind of signpost the teacher towards as an observer. So as I was saying, the impact was that I was able to make immediate changes to the way I was working with this class, because I could see and hear what they could see and hear. So this is the system that we're using tonight. Obviously it's a little bit different because Roger will be in the classroom observing, so that he gets that point of view. But we thought it would be quite interesting to see it from two perspectives really. What do you get when you're in the classroom, and how do we see it in the same way just watching it on film or not? So when we have that conversation afterwards, that might be some of the things that come up. As we have equipment for more time now, we're becoming much more creative with its use. So last term we used it to set up a live observation to enable a group of teachers to watch one lesson at the same time, to do some training really on how to use the new proformers for learning walks. This term we've used it as a way of showing and training cover supervisors and new staff about how to establish routines and expectations at the beginning of lesson. And then hopefully tonight it will just offer us another perspective and perhaps more of a kind of realistic experience for Chris and for the students there, because as Helen said, they are using this as a real lesson, and so it's a way of accessing it without them having 80 people watching them and being able to see 80 people watching them. So the task for you tonight really is to put yourself in the shoes of the live observer. So if you had been granted access to watch this, and Chris had shared this film with you, he's teaching it right now, you're watching it from a remote location. It doesn't have to be even in the same school. As long as you've got an internet connection and you go to this website, you can access it. The task really is to think about what comments would you put, what would you want him to see when he watched this film back, what would you want to signpost to him, and then we're hoping that in discussion afterwards we can also hear from Roger and see what he saw and make those comparisons there as well.
Okay, so you have got a sheet to write on. I ought to let you know that on this side, this is a Google Live document, and towards the end of the lesson, they will be populating this document with an essay plan that they've created as a whole class. So on the plan, you'll see that they're creating parts of a much bigger picture, which is a response to the question, how far do you agree with the view, Western monarchs, transform the logics and execution of crusading. But they're all working on that based on prior reading. So I think...
No. Just to reinforce, okay, the technology is really important. I'll talk about a session that Mike Hughes ran on Monday, which was about video technology as well. I'll also talk about the services, coincidentally, that which one cameraman at the top can offer to you as well, because it's a useful development tool. So it's about teaching development rather than judging by Ofsted standards. My challenge is, that's the first and last time I want to mention that word in this session, okay? So I'll try and not mention it again, and I'll penalise myself somehow if I okay, let's
I know that most of the discussion...
how many fingers do you want me to blow, just to prove that?
Just while we're just going down, I've asked him to, most of the discussion is going to be about the actual lesson itself as opposed to the use of kit. We would like to have a little bit of time at the end to talk about that, but if you are interested in discussing or coming back to the school school to talk about how we've used it or just to have a look at it, we're more than happy to have people and discuss how it's going. Thank you.
Individual examples. So as you're having this discussion, jot down, record your thinking. On the A3 sheet would be perfect so that all of you can refer to it. If your example is just of one crusade, then you can't show change over time. Hi there.
Well, okay, First Crusade, no monarchs involved, that's what you can use that as a standing point without much. Second Crusade has the monarchs, but they kind of copied the First Crusade into staggered style, but they changed it in terms of Conrad building bridges for the guys behind him, but they still ultimately failed until they started using ships later on. So ultimately they're, not massive transformation. Because they tried to, because quantum bridge is sort of trying to...
I didn't necessarily think it was the
I'm interested in where you stand.
well, maybe change, but didn't transform.
How would you
Definitely.
The change and transformation. I'd say change can be gradual, and we didn't necessarily suggest that the end and the first were that different, whereas transformation, there has to be a large difference between the beginning and the end. No. What's that thing that's got a doll where they're like dolls inside a doll? A Russian doll. Do you know what I mean? I feel like that's what the crusades are. Like it's just like you can see echoes of all the crusades throughout. I'm going to put that in my coursework. A metaphor. Yeah, a bit of English. I don't really think
I like that. What I'd really like to see now is you turn that into precise examples. What was it that was happening in the third and fourth crusades that you can see precedents of earlier on? When earlier on did you see them? So what would you say are the big changes that
but even saying that, you would commend it for that, that's not transformation. So yeah.
Is there a precedent for that in the first and the second crusade?
And if anything, Innocent was the one who brought in a centralised.
Yeah, that's an alternative factor.
Yeah, so I'd say that's
So you're coming in from a different angle. It's not just the fact that the
then who is third?
haven't transformed. It's actually other factors are at work here. That's
We're missing one.
Okay. So let's pin it down with examples. Can you find a quotation? You've got about another 5 minutes I'm going to give you for this. I want to pin it down now with examples and quotations.
So would you say
Right, over here, how are we doing? Have we agreed? You haven't agreed, have you? You have agreed, have you? Right, where are we? I can't see anything.
This is our view, right?
Yeah. There.
I'm a little bit like that, but kind of we all agree that they didn't transform things.
Yeah, okay, right, why?
I think one thing that I thought stood out about like Western ones really practice something. They were talking about like urban writing sort of originality and support for the person said. I kind of was thinking, that was really where I did it. That was the main thing that stood out to us.
So you're talking about which change do you think is most significant, and using that therefore to analyse whether they will transform religious into this execution. So what about outside the scenery? What about military discipline? What about all of those things that we keep coming back to Richard the Lionheart and the monarchy generally? So, do you feel the same? Do you not think he transformed it with that discipline on his marches? Yeah, remember that quote, that's very good. So Richard's pattern is very disciplined, using the start of that march, which has been started. Good. So, you down here, you've got some examples to support it, you've got some historians' views. Good. Do you think everyone will agree with you? Okay. Could I ask you to go and place your cross up on the board? You can call yourselves table 1 here, table 2 there, table 3, 4, 5. Up on the board, board pens here, nice and quickly up you come. Very interested to hear some of this.
Where do you want to go? Or where Jazzy literally where Jazzy
No, as in forward.
If you're not happy with that,
you can be fine. What would you Four. You're number 3. Yeah, I didn't commit to you. I did come down to I'll come to you first. Okay. Sorry. Let's put it back. Right, okay. Hello? You are number 1 here. Right, where's Josh going? Where's he going? No, come on, sit down. Right, okay. Sorry to do this to you, Aaron. I need to stop your conversations. Sorry, Louis. Sorry. Okay, this is very interesting. It's nice to see your table numbers in amongst Tierman and France and Astrid, isn't it? There you are, mixing it with the big guns. So let's see where you stand. Table number 1, obviously, I just heard George say that means we're going to get picked on. Yeah, we are going to get picked on because you're down here. Table 1, I'm interested in this because look, Christopher Tierman spent his life devoted, studying the Crusades. He's up here, but yet you have chosen to disagree with him. You think that Western monarchs did not transform the logistics and execution of the Crusade. Want to explain?
Well, I think we have different arguments for it.
Okay, well let's have yours, Claire.
So I personally think that there wasn't a transformation at all anyway. It was just kind of development over time, and it was slight improvements, but no transformation.
Okay.
The gaps came from a number of factors, and also because I read the paper so much, I think it's the Greek and the Italian British dates.
There's 2 elements to your answer. One, that there wasn't a great transformation anyway, but if there was, it isn't just down to the monarchs. Is that similar to this answer down here, Jasmine? Okay, what I want now then is to hear a couple of examples. Remember what we said this process is all about. It's about planning. We're planning through this discussion. We know that in that paragraph that we're going to write, whenever you write your coursework, you need to show a range of examples. You need to show change over time. So I need to now see that you can underpin a point like that with some examples, maybe with a historian's view. So, Jess, can you support, you obviously agreed with that view, that it wasn't a transformation. Can you give precise examples to support that?
Well, I was saying before that I thought that, well, originally my argument for the monarchs when I was on that side was that there was change in use of the sea.
Okay.
And then dating back to like the first crusade, I've been invited to what was narrating about using of ships for the first crusade. So it's kind of shown right from the first, maybe 100 change, and so it's a revolutionary victory in the third.
Okay, so what Richard did in the Third Crusade had already been done in the First Crusade. Okay, so tables number 1 and 5 are quite clearly down here. What about up here? Who's table 2? That's you over here, isn't it? Austin, do you want to expand on that? Because you've obviously got a very different view to them.
Yeah, I'll say that, particularly in the second crusade, I'll say it was an enhanced change from the first crusade, but in the third crusade I would say it was a transformation based on using the sea route. But the only thing I would say is that, yes, the monarchs, I would say, transformed it, but I would say the Italian states were able to facilitate it.
Say that last bit again.
The Italian states were able to facilitate it.
What can you support that? When did the Italian city-states facilitate this change to the sea route? Can you take that a bit further?
Well, like in the first crusade, yes, Urban did say, oh, we help the Crusaders, but it wasn't just Urban, it was for the sphere of influence of the Genoese who wanted to also help the Crusaders.
Okay. Can I just in your group there, I really like what Austin said there, this idea that the Italian city-states facilitated the monarch's ability to use the sea route. In your group, very quickly, can you think of an example to support that? Austin is talking about at the start of the First Crusade that the Genoese, what about later on? The monarchs used them on the Third Crusade, on the Second Crusade. Have you got evidence to prove, or can you think of arguments? Have you read something that suggests that the Italian city-states actually facilitated that change? Over to you. 2 minutes. Can you come up with something? Off you go. Paul is the only one you can think of. So the Fourth Crusade is the only one you can think of. What does that suggest about the monarchs? When were the monarchs? When did the monarchs bring about the change to the sea route? Your example for the Italian city-states is on the Fourth Crusade. What conclusion can you draw from that? Happy with that? Okay. Make a note for yourself, Callum, to follow that up. Right. Okay. Let's unpick this now. Austin said the monarchs made the change, but it was facilitated by the city-states. You're thinking over here, Priya. What was your view over here?
What did we say?
You want to take it on, Callum? Go on. Explain what you were just saying to me.
The only real changes that we could remember occurred in the Fourth Crusade, which obviously happened after Richard had taken the sea route. So any changes that the Italian states had done were kind of carrying on from Richard's work.
So you are still arguing, therefore
that it's the Western monarchs transformed.
Okay, right, okay. Can anyone from this side of the room, who seem to be further down here, can anybody argue against that? He's saying that the Italian city-states contribution was in the Fourth Crusade, and therefore it's a great example of exploring change over time, because you're saying, right, Richard did it first, therefore they're just following on. So, can anyone come against that? I've heard a lot from Jess. Michael, have you got anything to...
John France said that in the extract gave us that in the Second Crusade, the only reason, the only reason they could take the sea was because the states controlled the Mediterranean.
Who else read France? Can we nod? Is that right? Yeah, thumbs up from Claire, not just a nod. So how does that? Does that fits in with Austin's argument then? That the Italian city-states facilitated it through, say it again, what were they doing?
They controlled the Mediterranean.
Controlled the Mediterranean. You nodded. Why did you nod? Why did you like that?
Because I completely agree, that's what France says in the extract. And also, I think, was that from what crusade were you from the second? Yeah, because in the first as well, from Austin's point, there's actually references to the Italian city-states in the First Crusade, like they genuinely ships supplied besieging Jerusalem.
Yep.
in 10 and 7.
So again, it's the Italian city-states, their dominance of the Mediterranean. And that's quite refreshing, isn't it? We're moving away from this kind of big man of history idea that Richard the Lionheart comes along in the Third Crusade, transforms single-handedly the logistics and execution of crusading. We're forgetting about the 40 years between the Second and Third Crusades where a lot had gone on. The Italian city-states had started to dominate the Mediterranean. I'm aware in terms of time, we could continue to explore this, but I would really like to move on to this last section, because what you're talking about now, the way that you're starting to discuss this, the way that Callum is talking about the Third and then on to the Fourth Crusade, and the way that Claire's talking about the First Crusade and thinking ahead to the Third Crusade, you're showing that sense of change over time. You're also, Michael, bringing in historians all the time. These are the ingredients for writing a successful paragraph, okay? We know that. Now let's put it into practice. Okay, so what I would like you to do, you're in your groups already, just pay really careful attention to this. You know what a good paragraph is. This is the list that you came up with 2 lessons ago based on your feedback from your essays. However, some of you are very aware that there are parts of that you haven't mastered yet, that you haven't got yet. So if you've got a pink post-it note on your laptop, that means that I want you to take responsibility for that aspect. So you will take responsibility for the opening sentences. You are the people who I want to see imposing direction on this paragraph. This group here, you had issues with selection. If you've got yellow, you struggle with selection. It might be, as in the case of Jasmine, that you did loads. And I want to see if you can refine that, if you can just pick the most relevant examples. It might be in other cases that you were choosing things that weren't relevant, okay? So if you've got yellow, you are going to be responsible for selecting the examples to show change over time. Finally, the blue is for those of you who on the last essay I felt could work on historians' views. Now, it might be that you included some, but maybe, Chanel, they were all from Hindley, or it might be that you included some, but they weren't entirely relevant. So I want you in the last group, if you've got blue, then you're going to be looking at historians' views. Okay, so the focus now is the process. How are you planning? We'll look at the plan at the end, but the process is what matters. You're not going to write this essay for your coursework. It's too vast. It's the opposite. It's too narrow. It's just looking at one aspect. You've got to look at the nature and the purpose. But it's the process that matters. Can you knit together 3 or 4 examples to convincingly show change over time? Can you knit together 3 or 4 examples with a historian's view? Can you possibly use an historian's view and evaluate it? Okay? So, if you would, open your laptops, go to this address. Why are you groaning? Why would you groan? You don't know what? Very strange. It's the latest technology. And when you get on there, I want you to go to Edit in Browser. And this... Oh no, mine's gone. So, this is what should come up. Oh, yes, sorry. There you go. There you are. So, tinyurl.com/QHG2YTU. Now, collectively, we're going to write we're going to plan an entire essay. So this group, have a look at the top of your sheet that's on your table with those lovely colourful sections on it. You're going to look at the transport and whether the Western monarchs transformed the transporting of crusades, just what we've been talking about. This group here are going to be looking at supplies. This group here are going to be looking at whether the monarchs transformed the military execution of crusading. This group here, transporting of crusades, a counter-argument though, and a counter-argument here against the fact that the Western monarchs transformed the military execution. Right. Is everybody clear on what we're doing? Everybody's typing in. Can we all just look this way for a moment? So I've got eye contact. I know I can see, I can gauge whether we're on board. Aaron, this way. Okay. Aaron, tell me, what are you going to be doing? What are you going to be focusing on? You yourself.
Oh, the deal, which is clear consensus
doesn't mean that you have to do it on your own. You can have help. You've got Chanel, who is an expert at this, on your table, but I want you to take responsibility for it. I want you to type that in. You're all going to be working on the same document. Okay, any further questions? No? Let's go. So, why do you think I found it hard to come up with a target for you? Is there any of these that you think is kind of weakness? Do you think Band 5 is the evaluation historians, but you've done all of these things really well throughout the course of this, I think your last lesson. I'd really like to see that you can explicitly evaluating the historian. So can you find any story who says something and then evaluate it? How are we doing? You deleted what somebody else is? Can I say, look, it's all very well having arguments and counter arguments, but internet warfare is not allowed. You can't delete other people's bullet points, which is what Louis is trying to do here. Not allowed. Not allowed. Right, so Louis, what's your job? Yeah, why, Louis? Why? But that's the element that's been missing. It's been a target, and you haven't actually moved on yet with that target. Okay? So I want to see you. Where's your notes? Where are you going to get these historians from? You're not going to magic them out of the air, are you? Right, come on then. Let's get your folder out. Start looking. What have you got? What material have you got? How are we doing? You all right? Pardon, where? Yeah. Right, so, seriously, I meant what I said. Chanel, your selection is fantastic. Your reputation to be supporting the group as well. But if we can have a bit of a wider range of historians, that would help. So let's get into your folder, let's start finding quotations. Right? Are you clear about the direction and paragraph? Yeah? You got your opening sentence done yet? Crafting it as we speak. We'll sort the reading on tomorrow. It's fine. Focus on this for now. Don't worry about it, honestly. Focus on selecting the examples. You've said some really impressive things today. Just want to see you selecting those examples. Remember, showing change over time. Just giving you two examples. Well, yours is the difficult group. I should have gone with first. I wanted to leave it a bit open, but might that be a problem? Go on then, argue against. What would you, okay, so you're going to argue, do you not? Surprise. Knowledge transforming the supplying crusader. Could you potentially write a paragraph which has an argument and then is evaluated? So there is a change, there is a development, but you said earlier on, you said developed, but not transformed. So how could you argue that you didn't transform? I'll leave you with that, but I think that's potentially a brilliant parallel. Who's responsible for the opening sentences? Josh, it's you. Why not? No, that's right. Right, get help. Claire, your opening sentences have been very good. The first couple of lines of your paragraph in your last essay, they were great. They get your essay out. But this is what you've got to master. Is if you listen to your answers here, if you can get the same clarity in your writing you've got with your verbal answers, it's band 5, no question. Okay, so let's sort it today. Right, well, I feel like I haven't seen this group at all. How are we doing? Have we committed anything to screening? Yeah. Ah, so you're getting your counter argument, you're just going to look at the next yours. Yeah.
Just keep it going for a couple of minutes so I can see what it's like.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, how it helped you the fact that your counter-argument is really quite fine, isn't it? I'll be 1 minute, Austin, but do keep your hand up, otherwise I'll forget. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't make the question clear enough. In terms of your time, what you're working on, how is it going to help the A is defined as really quite a closed counter-argument, quite a narrow counter-argument? Yeah, it's limited, and it's a useful thing to remember. If you keep your counter-arguments to one area, it might help you to stop the vast expanse, which is going to be an issue. I'm just going to word count later down the line. Okay. Sorry, Austin, what's the problem? Yeah. Well, okay. Chanel, did the series help to limit the casualties sustained? Yeah? Can you give me an example? They were. Can we? What else? I mean, that sounds like they might have needed a brush. What is it? Feature one where just constantly surprised at one. But what I want to see is the examples. Where is it?
Okay. New experience for some of you, maybe for many of you. I always try to avoid cameras, so when I can, but it's always a brave thing to do. It's about 4:45. I'm proposing we spend 15 minutes or so talking about what we saw, what was effective. I'll be able to tease out what I saw that you didn't see, maybe. Okay, that's what you can lose. Use the technology sometimes. What you gained by having a distance, seeing it from far, and then perhaps we could go to looking at, with Helen joining in, about how you might use that. Because the next stage would be for that teacher to use that to be coached into improving teaching practice. And what would you say? What sort of conversation would you have with that teacher about how to improve that conversation? Getting finished before 5:30, is that good for you? Okay, that's a proposal. I've got some enthusiastic nods around the room to do that. Okay. And you're going to do most of the talking, I hope, as well. Okay. So that's different ways we could look at it. We could look at progress of the pupils. We could look at engagement of the pupils. We could look at a whole host of things. You know what? I'm just going to cut straight to it. I'm going to say, let's talk about the teacher. still going to come in for a while, and we're not on camera. Well, we are. Okay, but we can talk straight about the teacher about what was he doing that was effective. What was he doing that was effective? So, I always say this, a favourite expression of mine. I'm going to let you discuss that with your neighbour. If you don't know each other, introduce each other, okay? It's much better than Facebook. You're actually there talking to that person, okay? So if you just, what was that teacher doing which actually made that a really, really effective message? Just a couple of minutes. Okay, colleagues, let's break into that conversation, please. I felt guilty about calling you colleagues. I still call you colleagues if I'm part-time retirement. Is that okay? Yeah? You're still colleagues because I'm still working a couple of days. If you really want to have a go at me, I've just come back from mountain biking and kind of just flake over a bit. That's the reason. But that's fine. So, colleagues, why was he good? Please.
He played the room incredibly well. The way he moved around, everybody was spoken to, addressing people I know, but not just that, knowing what they'd discussed or read or written about previously. So Chanel was an expert in this, so could say something about that. Yeah, so it was incredibly inclusive with what they were doing.
Do you agree?
Yeah. He definitely knew the children very well, the students, and there's just one moment where sort of I think he just immediately someone was maybe a bit too passive for his liking, and he immediately brought them in.
Any other evidence that you really knew the pupils?
Differentiated post-it that he used for them
Differentiated post-it, yeah.
targeting based on their setting.
So I don't know if you could pick up on that on screen, but each of the laptops had the child's name on it with a different coloured post-it note. And there was a little bit of worksheet with the different tasks. The big clue for me there was, okay, that's very clever, isn't it? Because that's actually knowing the group really well, knowing the weaknesses, areas of development for each individual pupil. I was able to check, because I was there, that the pupils understood that that was a weakness as well. And I think I talked to 3 pupils about what colour have you got, what does it mean, is that accurate, is that you? Okay, each of them very articulate, give a really good explanation of that. A little bit too wordy in the middle of essays, I need to concentrate it down, and that's why I've got that particular skill. So very, very knowledgeable about the pupils' strengths and weaknesses. Helen?
Yeah, and something else I picked up on, which I think using the Intermanner, at one point he said, why do you think I found it difficult to put you in a group? Which was one student, wasn't it? And we couldn't quite catch some of her responses, but she was clearly involved in quite a lot of dialogue, which I would say is another piece of evidence to show that through very sound assessment, he knows the students.
Anything else then? Okay, so he knows the pupils, he knows the strengths, he knows the weaknesses, and is able to accurately respond to his very detailed knowledge of those pupils. If he's doing that, he's grabbing hold of the pupils' strengths and weaknesses, and he's pushing on, okay, their progress and their ability to cope with quite detailed, extensive knowledge of crucibles.
He's questioning.
Please, tell me about the questioning. It's really interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it's digging deeper and knowing that the students can bring more to the table and making that challenge really quite hard. And I think that's a trust thing again, because if you don't scaffold questioning appropriately, you lose a student. But knowing that, knowing the fabric of that classroom meant he could do that strategically really, really well.
Okay, can anybody give me an example of the type of question he was asking and the scaffolding questions? Did that come to mind? Please.
When someone answered the question, what about? So he was sort of asking for further development, so he was asking for examples to show application of obviously things that they'd learned previously. That was quite good, again, drawing them out, think further about not just giving short answers, but actually extending, showing whether they manage to consolidate their learning or not.
Absolutely.
The planning is, I mean, where the kids filling in these, because the planning is astonishing.
Yes.
Knows the text, clearly knows the subject incredibly well, and that's excellent scaffolding
question. And that was the gist of today. As I was going through 2 or 3 folders, again, those are quite regularly those folders. That's what the pupils are used to. And that's why they handle things so well. Yeah, absolutely. Any other points about the question?
Okay, and therefore you think this halfway through, so if you like, developed their idea, that was the point that they were making sometimes as opposed to.
If you go to please.
I should say I thought the continuum on the board was very effective because he knew instantly who would then challenge or have a different opinion. So he knew who to draw on to then provide a counter argument.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did that at one time, didn't he? He talked about, okay, so you believe this, you know, and actually on this table we've got this viewpoint. Okay, and he actually drew and challenged the pupils there to justify their thoughts, their arguments. Please.
And there was a slightly passive student who seemed stiller than the others, and when he did ask the student a question, the student gave an answer and gave a very good answer. He then asked for other students to support that student, maybe as a sort of to boost that student's confidence a bit more.
He knew this. Please. Sorry, now I can help, please.
I think when he would go around individually as well, he doubted the pupils' answers, so they had to give more information and give more evidence to prove that they were right. Good way of drawing out that.
Yeah. It was a very effective question. It wasn't a single word answer. I'm going to use the word challenge. Okay, those were challenging questions, when there is no sitting back. I'm just going to drift off and wonder about what's on the telly tonight for a few minutes. Those pupils have to be more focused.
And Amy and I were talking about scaffolding and the way he scaffolded questions. But by bringing in, as always been said, other students, they were kind of creating a network of scaffold, really. They were scaffolding each other's ideas, and I'm wondering whether that is complemented by the fact that they can all see this document together taking shape, and because it's still taking shape now, I think that'll be finished fairly soon. So.
Do you feel like I did that pupil could quote the Fourth Crusade and the role of the Italian state in facilitating, but he really couldn't remember where he read it? Did you get the feeling he's going to go on tonight and look up where he's read it? Okay, I think so. I think so, because that challenge was there. Not what a fantastic answer. Thank you for remembering that, recognising that it was much later. I guess a feature of the Crusades. But where did you read that? In which historian did you read to know that that was actually something which facilitated Crusades as well? So I'm looking here, when we talk about Bloom's taxonomy, okay, we're looking at the synthesis of information coming across here, we're looking at a challenge of high order skills of synthesizing material from books that they read. I guess you would have been able to do that, but I challenged the pupils about, okay, so we're quoting different historians. Have you read them? And they had. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit old. I don't remember doing this when I was a sixth form. I just don't remember doing it. It was a case of what you could learn. I'm just going to go off the piece for a little bit, but my brother, 2 or 3 years older than me, we could share what we'd done in the history lessons, because the history teacher came in every lesson in my boys' grammar school and dictated. Okay, and I had really neat handwriting at one time, but dictated. I hadn't got a clue why Henry VIII acted in the way that he did, but I knew factually what he'd done. These pupils have got a very deep understanding of the reasons for it. Anything else about the skill of this teacher?
I thought it was really effective that he knew exactly what he wanted the students to achieve by the end of the lesson, and all the time the questioning and everything that was planned, and even the bits that were perhaps unplanned, that were more kind of flexible, when he responded to that student's answer and got them all to work in groups. It was always really tightly focused on the areas that he sort of planned from the beginning and the learning objectives. So bringing in evidence, evaluating where they'd read that before, and the whole time that focus was really there. It didn't go off on a tangent at all at any point. It was very tightly focused.
And he took the pupils with him. Okay, every stage, everything he did was explain why he was moving. You know, when he finished the part and he was going to move to the use of the software, He explained what it's there for. So actually it was really interesting that, you know, sometimes as teachers, you know what you're doing in your head. You just forget sometimes to tell pupils what you're doing and why you're doing it, don't you? Well, I used to do that all the time. I used to catch up eventually. This guy Chris seemed to be actually taking time deliberately to make sure they understood where they were going on this journey.
No, I mean, I just have to say, he obviously loves the subject, which is great, because you need to be as a history teacher. And also, as any of but I am a history teacher, but the point is that, you know, you got the impression, didn't you, that this guy knew what he was talking about, but he loved it, and he wanted the kids to love it, and he wanted them to make sure they were going to be a success at investigating historical developments and the interpretation. That's it. And he's a great guy. I love to get his class.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of seeing him on a previous occasion for a different purpose, but it's not often you hear sixth formers in this context say the word passion. Because I was pushing them about why did they enjoy history, you know, is it something they had to go through? They all loved history. There's always one isn't going to do history at university, and the question then is, well, why? Why do you enjoy history? Okay, I'm not going to share what they said about different things. The IT, the groan was about the IT apparently. Okay, it never works in the school, which is clearly wrong because it was working on this occasion, so that was fine. Yeah, that's fine.
There was some sound issues here at the beginning. Well, what I picked up on, so we did have to run down and turn a mic off. I think the sound wasn't great here, so we can talk about that later.
Okay, but I would say you've picked up enough.
It does seem that way, yeah.
Two pupils, 17, 18-year-olds, telling a stranger in the room that the teacher is passionate, and they use that word, okay, passionate about the subject. Children in opposite ends of the classroom, so they weren't very nervous and hadn't been told or paid to say that, I guess, you know, but actually the teacher was passionate about that subject. And the one boy, and it has to be a boy, as it said, he even came into the common room and sat down with us and talked about the Crusades, as if that was something you shouldn't ever contemplate doing. But that was something which stuck in his head, that here we've got a teacher who loves his subject so much. And as you say, getting an expert in the subject. You know, my grade D history would not enable me to go in and do that with the same expertise, even if I'd read it as a night before, which I used to do, of course, as we all do, from time to time. Okay, perhaps I used to do it before the night before when I taught a little bit of RE, but no, absolutely passionate. And that love of learning, which I think, sir, you were going towards, that love of learning, the children were picking that up, it seems to me. Okay, there was a love of learning. Absolutely. Anything else, please? Please.
I just think that the sort of SMSC angle, it's evident that that's come on practice because it's built a culture of respect, so the students are there feeling confident talking in front of one another, better knowledge of his answers. I just thought that was a really good piece of evidence that it's come on practice.
Yeah. That was a culture of respect that had been working together. And I just hesitate sometimes when you have a continuum and people right on the continuum where they are. But that's okay, that was just a prompt. For the pupils to begin their thought processes. Because you have to look around. If you've got the privilege of going into a classroom, you have to look around because on the wall behind me, there are some more continuums with very detailed notes and explanations. So whilst I was hesitant, I was seeing sort of 4 or 5 words written down. That's fine. Okay, it was a prompt to further discussion, and the pupils were able to develop that inquiry. Absolutely. What would you need to have seen that you haven't seen then to make this an even better lesson? A couple of minutes. What would you need to see? Okay, colleagues, just let's be absolutely sure about things. I am going to climb on my hobby horse a little bit and just excuse me, but you'll understand and agree with me. But if you have the privilege of seeing another teacher teach, you've got to be really cautious, okay? Because I'll give you the answer, okay? I found, and I'll stop flicking through a document from an organisation. O at the start of their name, okay? But that teacher was delivering directed and timely support for those pupils, okay? Which ensured that the progress was there. Incisive feedback, this time verbal feedback. Okay, the fact that the folders didn't contain any assessed work with feedback, action, response, I totally ignored because that wasn't the issue. The teacher was verbally feedback, and that's the important thing, because something's missing, it doesn't make it a bad lesson. I'm still on my hobby horse, okay? Really high expectations that challenge the pupils responded to. That was not a comfortable place to be sometimes. You had to be on the ball as pupils. That teacher was challenging. He was developing another word which I like, okay, the resilience of the pupils. Right? They were prepared to fail sometimes and have a go at it, but not afraid. Not afraid to voice an opinion. Okay? Every pupil's opinion was respectful, wasn't it? And the pupils respected each other as well. And I'm going to say you there had, and I like the phrase again, you have a curious audience, you've got an audience there, you have a love of learning in that situation. And when you have that in your hand, okay, then that's a unique position. But that's one piece of evidence. 20 minutes, 25 minutes, that's one piece of evidence. You know all the positives. Before you start awarding him a massive pay rise for the session today, what else are you going to need to know? Somebody please. Sorry? Outcomes, okay. And Helen is going to talk to us a little bit about the immediate outcomes as well. Yeah. And I've seen some fantastic lessons, and then being hugely disappointed at the end of the year when the results came. It's going to take a long time actually trying to untangle why that happened, because the lesson I saw was outstanding, but the results were atrocious. What was happening there? And you need those outcomes. Helen, do you just talk us through briefly the outcomes for that lesson?
Yeah, I think one of my questions when you said, well, how would you be coaching this person when you watched the film? Of course, I was starting to think, heck, I don't know where to start. I think I want them coaching me. But one of the questions I asked was, what was the advantage of using Google Docs and having this? I wondered, is this going to be style over substance, really? And why Chris had chosen to use this? I'm now starting to see why. This is the final document. I'm assuming they're using pizza now and they're not still working on it. But what Chris has got here is 2 pages, and because of the way he differentiated it, you can see what every single student has contributed in terms of what this lesson plan is. And he was talking, I know one colleague was saying he absolutely stuck to the objective. There was no getting away from the objective and the purpose of the lesson. A few things I noticed about these changing over time, at this paragraph 2 here in the secondary stage, you've got whereas, you've got these kind of, they're starting to draw connections between second and third crusades. I'm assuming, Chris, you've joined us, but that's what you would have hoped to see. Some of the paragraphs you could see as we were able to do were being populated much quicker. I think whoever was doing paragraph 3, that group was starting to work more quickly than perhaps group number 1. And Chris is now able to go and look at this and think, well, actually, some of these students have made more progress than others. And he's got a similar opportunity now to go back into the next lesson and then pick up where he knows their strengths and areas for development are. But some of these characters are certainly starting to bring in, Simon Lloyd is brought in there, they're starting to quote from their reading. You've got first and fourth crusade, so I'm imagining that Chris, as the subject expert, you'll be thinking this is what I'm expecting to see here. So now I understand why Google Documents has been used here, and it's been used very successfully. So that's what I would probably say about the outcomes. I don't know if anyone else would want to comment on that.
Can I just ask about next steps? What would the students go on to do now?
Well, tomorrow I've got them twice tomorrow, and they are planning. We're going to be focusing on them planning their own coursework answer. So tomorrow's lesson, I talked to them a lot about, and I don't know what you saw and what didn't, but I talked to them a lot about the process, and it's taking that process that they've done today into tomorrow's lesson for 2 lessons, and I just want them to be running what we did in the lesson through themselves individually.
So they each take that and adapt it in their own...
No, that won't be relevant to their own question. That's deliberately focused on one aspect of crusading. Their question will be looking at the nature and purpose of crusading as a whole. So the process that was involved in that, they will then be using to answer a far broader question tomorrow and over the next few weeks.
Thank you. Chris is here. Any other questions? For Chris?
Was Mahmoud Ali that one?
No, he wasn't. No, he was absent. He was absent today. And actually, I just felt it wasn't particularly appropriate today, so I didn't mention it.
It's a secret code. The IRIS system, and I'm not on commission either, much because they're quite expensive, but I wish I was on commission. But there are, this system and other systems actually have earpieces available. Okay, so Chris could have been fitted with an earpiece today, and you could have been in here coaching him. I guess coaching is not always about what you're doing wrong, it's sometimes what you're doing well and how you can make it better. Just turn to you over, just a minute or so, real short. He's here now, okay? Imagine he's got the earpiece. How are you going to improve his teaching? Because, you know, it's good. It's understanding in many ways, again, not often grading, okay? But there's always room for improvement. He's here, open to improvement. Talk amongst yourselves, into his earpiece. At any point in the lesson, what would you want to say to him? Just a minute. We're privileged to have Chris here. Can you make it specific advice to that pupil? What your intention? He's here looking into a microphone, observing that lesson. He's got the earpiece. What are you going to say? You're not going to say anything. You caught my eye. What are you going to say to him? Please.
We had a small queries. We noticed that Mike was quite still, but you did strategically intervene a bit later, and he was quite eloquent in his answer. But that's potentially, if you saw something, you could say of that one particular student. Is he purposefully left? Is he quite shy?
Yeah, no, not at all. I'd be interested to know and watch it back and see who I did leave. Because I certainly didn't mean to leave anyone.
You didn't leave it, but he was just a little bit still. You know,
But you would want to know whether he was aware.
Yeah, that was it.
That's your point, isn't it?
Was it strategically, because we thought it might have been, because if he felt a little less confident, because you've got some very able students in there, and actually he needed time to feel more confident in the lesson, then actually it was right that you left him, because then when you asked him a question, he could answer it really well then.
Yeah,
so.
It's a bit of a blur, I can't quite remember. But I think, I remember at one point in the lesson he did answer a question very well. It may well have been in the first phase before you kind of came into the room, possibly. Yeah.
Okay, somebody else is going to speak into the microphone into your ear.
I was just going to say actually that the problem with it, which you wouldn't have known, was the fact that at the start of the link that we saw, the camera just zooms in on him.
For about 10 minutes.
It's probably more to do, if anything, with the way the camera was located.
But it possibly says something about, I was aware that at one point I was talking very intently to groups. And when you're having a discussion like that, you have to be in that moment. Otherwise you can't, you can't react to what they're saying. And I was aware at one point, I thought, well, I've been in that discussion, they could be playing up on the other side. And with a lower school group, you would never do that, because you actually don't have the same depth of discussion, unfortunately. I don't know, but yes, I think I perhaps wasn't entirely aware at all times of what was going on as well.
Anything else?
I think anyone else got their hand? I think I would want to ask, and I was trying to work out on balance whether at a point in the lesson you had a whole class exposition with before they moved into the laptop activity, and you were teasing out their understanding, doing that kind of scaffolding each other and using their names beautifully, and someone said this, what did you think, and so on. That seemed really rich, that discussion, and I would probably say, why are you stopping it?
Yeah, I toyed with the idea, and somebody spoke about, Jasmine talked early in the lesson about it being a transformation, a change rather than a transformation. And she talked about how the starting point was actually that the early Crusades were far more advanced than perhaps people give them credit for, and how therefore the level of transformation wasn't so great. And at that point, at the end of the discussion, I wondered about whether we just tried to map that. Having said that, I knew that what I wanted to do tomorrow was I need to get on with them planning the coursework. I wanted to model how we take the thinking to there, so I had to give enough time for that. So it was in the balance, but.
And so would you, had we not, or had a coach not been watching, would you have still
I think,
on, do you think?
I think given the context, I know this sounds funny, but given the context and knowing that we've got mock exams coming up at the end where coursework will inevitably take it back, I think I probably still would have had to push on so that tomorrow is as productive as possible.
Do you have this type of experience in your own schools? Are you filmed? Do you have the chance to sit down with somebody who can coach you? Just nod in the right direction, yes or no, you do. Is it worthwhile? Do you find it worthwhile?
I've just started here, but I do have the opportunity to take advantage of it.
You're finding it worthwhile. You have to say that anyway, don't you? Yeah, anything else? Please.
In terms of the discussion we were having when we were asked about what would we say in the earpiece, I think with somebody who's perhaps very new to the profession, I think it'd be much easier to think what to say, because I think it's a really good device for watching the sort of mannerisms of the teacher. And I don't know how long you've been teaching, but I assume from like subject knowledge and everything that you've been teaching for some time. And then I think it's a bit harder with a colleague who's perhaps more confident with their role in the classroom to be able to pick out on those finer details that go on, where perhaps it would be more appropriate to be in the classroom and looking through books and folders and so on. But as a device for being able to spot sort of mannerisms that the teacher's got and things that they notice in the classroom and their presence and so on, perhaps it's a more valuable tool in that respect.
Let me just, 3 or 4 points, okay. Max the chef, Dr. Peter Kent, Mike Hughes, and something else which will come to the mind, okay. We'll finish off on those points if you allow me to, okay, which was Max the Michelin chef up in in the Peak District, working not in the big house, in a little bistro with another chef there, working side by side, chatting to him. And he said that he's just training the chef, and he'll go back to the big house a little bit later. And I said, what, a couple of months then, working side by side, and he's learning the techniques. He just looked at me and said, oh, stupid. And I said, oh no, I'm going to be here a couple of years. How many times do we have the experience as teachers of having an expert working alongside us in the classroom? Because that to him was how his chef is going to become the expert chef. This goes some of the way, but not all of the way. But it's an opportunity that we need to grab. Iris is one, as Helen said. There are other versions of it as well. Richard was the 4th thing I was going to say. Richard Wood, the cameraman at the top there. This is his little company. So this will be appearing on a private area of YouTube that is available for you to use for CPD. But Richard is also available. I'm just going to sing his praises because I never do it. To you film in your school. Much cheaper than Iris. Okay, so for example, I had a teacher who was really not comfortable about having anybody in the room, and she was a great teacher. But every time somebody came into the room, she just fell apart. I asked Richard to come in and film, just go for it, just go for it. And a colleague, he spent the whole lesson filming her in a lesson that she agreed to produce one CD of that lesson which she had took away. and later became an outstanding teacher. But certainly, Richard, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're available. It's cheap, well, relatively cheap. Relatively cheap. He's a proper filmmaker, but certainly you can get together equipment for schools. You can offer that opportunity to come in and film lessons and so forth. Yeah, okay, that's great. Mike Hughes, and I'm nearly finished. Mike Hughes, a speaker you should be aware of that we've used many times, was in Northland School on Monday, earning a fortune. 3-minute clip of a primary school year 6 class with the camera being carried by the teacher on the shoulder. I'm not quite sure, but it's nothing like the quality that Richie does. Mike Hughes spent the following hour and a bit talking about what we saw. Actually, that micro analysis. We tend to go for the big picture. Okay, this is what makes Chris a great teacher, what did he do? Here he was actually, we were dissecting what the questions were. And certainly when you have that ability to have that little bit of film like Iris does in your own private area, or Richard, Lexi, and that analysis, the micro-analysis that Mike Hughes is getting into is certainly really, really valuable exercise. And again, I just recommend you go out there and do that, because if you do a little bit of classroom research, which is what Partnership Plus is about, and you try something in the classroom, why don't you record yourself? Okay, then go home, put your hood up, okay, go into a darkened room and see yourself on TV, okay, and just then ask you to see it with somebody who would make a really good coach. Okay, that's off my public horse for a little bit. I should apologise. Lawrence Sheriff teachers here will know that I'm not Dr. Peter Kent. Dr. Peter Kent couldn't make it today, so I'm sorry if you come in here under false pretenses. Dr. Peter Kent is head of Lawrence Sheriff Grammar School. He was the president of ASCL last year, but he's a different sort of size and shape to me. He's much slimmer, much shorter. A little bit younger, but looks older. So, yeah, I'll go straight back to him, that's quite good. I'm going to say, could we have a round of applause, please?